shark who's about to hit Hollywood.
I got an idea for a movie.
Doesn't everybody?
Now the man who knows all the angles.
Yesterday you were a loan shark.
Yeah, but I was never that into it.
You think the movie business is any different?
Is calling all the shots.
You must bring something heavy to the deal.
I do. Me.
He's got no respect for us.
John Travolta.
You're a stuntman, huh?
Yeah.
That's not bad for a guy his size.
Gene Hackman.
Hey, let me help you out. Suck harder.
Rene Russo.
I know you're acting sometimes, but you don't show.
You thought I was faking?
And Danny DeVito.
How did it all slip away?
Well, it didn't slip away, Martin. You did when you went off with Nikki at my birthday party.
Yeah, that was a good party. Our business is movie business.
Don't you puke on my shoes, Harry.
I may have to go back to loan sharking just to take a rest.
Get Shorty. Rated R. Starts Friday, October 20th at theaters.
And we're back, like we never left. Welcome to the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your early Sunday evening with me here in New York. But once again, we're going to skip past all that promotional jazz and get right to the guts of the episode. We will step away, again, briefly, from the Halloween horror series and talk about a movie that I consider an all-timer, now nearly 3 decades old, which celebrates its 29th anniversary of being released. Released on October 20th, 1995, and me and my dear old dad, we went to see it in theaters, and we both hit the ceiling, absolutely loved it. Masterpiece, maybe a half a notch below Pulp Fiction, but a movie that's in that ballpark as far as a lot of twists, although not from a mystery angle, a lot of action, comedy, and sometimes, let's just say there might be murders while funny shit is going on, and just a film that would seem to be a mess, but is magnificent. And that movie is Barry Sonnenfeld's adaptation of Elmore Leonard's runaway best-selling novel, Get Shorty. Now, Get Shorty is a movie that is based off this book by Elmore Leonard, and the character in the book is Ernesto Palmer, who goes by Chili. Now, my dad was an Elmore Leonard fan, but Elmore Leonard is the kind of author who he inspired a very devoted, almost cultish following. And for example, the great sports writer and author who I met 5 years ago, Mike Lupica, is basically, despite himself being a successful author, Elmore Leonard, he thought Elmore Leonard was his guy, his favorite author. And so my dad liked Elmore Leonard, but he didn't have to read every single book. But he read Get Shorty, and when the movie was, kind of not in the making, but when we first saw the trailer, Dad said something like, "Oh, that's a really good book. This movie looks terrific." Now, he probably would have been interested in seeing the movie anyway because of the strength of the cast. We both liked Rene Russo. She's terrific in the the later Lethal Weapon movies 3 and 4. And she's incredible opposite Clint Eastwood in The Line of Fire. And she was great earlier that year in Get Shorty, in Outbreak with Dustin Hoffman and Morgan Freeman and Donald Sutherland and Kevin Spacey. So Get Shorty was promoted in such a way that just the poster alone, and this isn't something that, at least for me, happens, but without knowing anything about the story, because I remember reading a blurb that suggested that Get Shorty was not a literal title, but in the world of the movie, it kind of is, because the character of Martin Weir, played by Danny DeVito, no offense, and I am not shaming people who are vertically challenged, but Danny DeVito is not as tall as some other people in the movie business. And yet the characters who somehow end up being producers of a movie that potentially Martin Weir could be interested in, they want him for a certain role, hence the title, Get Shorty. Like, it's not an accidental title. It is not a title that exists in a vacuum. It is a very literal title. The poster for this movie, though, now, I didn't know anything about the story. My dad did, but I knew nothing of the story. You can think of the mid-90s and some people who were huge stars in the business that are still names now, but not like that, and some people who are more or less retired, as in the case of Gene Hackman. The poster is a picture of John Travolta Rene Russo, Gene Hackman, and Danny DeVito. And there is something about Hackman in particular in this picture that made me want to see the movie without knowing anything about it. Because when I think of Gene Hackman's one of the greats. You can argue that he's the greatest living actor. You'll get no counter from me. He's on a very short list of people, including Denzel, who have won Best Supporting Actor and Best Lead Actor. Gene Hackman won Lead Actor for The French Connection. I mean, it's a really good movie, but if you ask me, is he actually better in The French Connection even than Clint in Dirty Harry? No. Is he better than Malcolm McDowell in A Clockwork Orange? No. Is he better than Jack Nicholson in Carnal Knowledge? No. Having said that, I love Gene Hackman. And Gene Hackman won Supporting Actor Oscar for Unforgiven a couple of years prior. And the picture of Gene wearing sunglasses and dressed as I'd never seen him dressed, there was something about Hackman's look. I said, I got to see this movie. Because just his look suggested a more lighthearted character than Gene would typically play, except if you want to throw Lex Luthor. But there was just something about the poster drew me in. And then the reviews were amazing. Virtually every major critic from Siskel and Ebert, David Denby, who I read every week in New York Magazine, absolutely loved it. It seemed that the film was a home run. And my dad was excited because of the book, but also because of Travolta, because he had been a Travolta fan from the 70s. And Travolta's career really dropped off after movies such as Blowout, which is terrific. That's the Brian De Palma film with Nancy Allen and Dennis Franz, among others. Travolta's career kind of hit the skids. And then he made a little bit of a comeback with the Look Who's Talking series, but those movies aren't really any good. And Travolta was headlining direct-to-video type films in the early 90s like Shout, and he did a movie The Experts with Ari Gross circa 1990, and it was just like, what are they doing in Hollywood? Why is this guy not headlining movies anymore? You could say that he's given some terrible performances, but you got to have a lot of talent to even give a terrible performance. So when Travolta, the splash that was made with Pulp Fiction, Travolta returned to his rightful place on Hollywood's A-list. I mean, he was 39 going on 40 at the time. He's still a very young man. He hit it big in his 20s. This was not somebody who became a star, a little bit later, like a Brad Pitt. Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise are almost the same age. Pitt's a little bit younger, a year and a half younger. But Cruise became a big star. He's barely out of his teens. It took Brad longer. And that's the way it works. In the case of Travolta, he was a major star when he was in his mid-20s. I mean, how old was he when Saturday Night Fever came out? Was he 25? It's different for everybody. It's not like sports where you're not going to suddenly become a big baseball star when you're in your 30s. It doesn't work that way, unless you're Jimmy Morris, the movie The Rookie with Dennis Quaid 20 years ago. But Travolta, after Pulp Fiction, he did a film, White Man's Burden, with Harry Belafonte. Not good, just not good. But the sense was Get Shorty was great, and it was going to be a significant hit. And this is one of those times where they got it right. The film was great, and it was a huge hit. It grossed almost 4 times its production cost, even though it's an R-rated movie. And with the R-rated films, especially in that era, it's not always so easy to guarantee that you're going to have an audience showing up, because you have a lot of people who want to take their kids, and then I don't know if we should take our kids. So Dad and I saw Get Shorty at the Broadway Mall in Hicksville. The movie theater had just opened within a couple of weeks. Actually, the first movie that we saw there, While You Were Sleeping, the screenplay, which sold for a shit ton of money in the early 90s. The script was called Coma Guy. And then it ended up While You Were Sleeping. That's a really good, as romantic comedies go, and Sandra Bullock was so great in that kind of role in that era. She just had such a grounded and such a believable quality. And Bill Pullman, fucking home run hitter. And great in that movie. And Peter Boyle, I think, was in the movie, but I was thinking of Jack Warden, who just knocked it out of the park there. And obviously Peter Gallagher was somebody that was considered back then to be so good looking, you just can't even take this guy serious. I think it was Robert Altman who said that. He said, Peter Gallagher is just such a great looking dude. It's like, fuck this guy. And he kind of said it in a funny way. But we saw Get Shorty, and it was a packed crowd. And there are those times, those magical times when you go to the movies and you just get the sense that everyone in the audience is with the story and with the characters and is behind the film all the way. And they're all laughing at the appropriate times. And this was one of the most involved crowds that I can ever remember. And another time, just to give you an idea of what I mean, when I saw White Men Can't Jump, I was still in high school. That was like March, April 1992. But seeing White Men Can't Jump at the old Movies at Sunrise Mall, which, 26 years has been gone, that was another time where it was a packed house, opening night, and the entire audience appeared to be on board with everything that was happening. Everyone is cracking up at the appropriate times. We're wondering what's going to happen. Well, in the case of Get Shorty, I remember the feeling of being in the theater. And there were certain moments in movies when things happen which take you by surprise. For example, 1991 Dead Again, where, okay, you've got Kenneth Branagh, you've got Emma Thompson, you've got Derek Jacobi, and then all of a sudden Robin Williams shows up and you say, holy shit. Well, Get Shorty, and this is a mild spoiler, there is a moment with Gene Hackman in this film where he goes to visit, I guess, his ex-wife. And when the door opens and it's Bette Midler, the audience went crazy. Nowadays, it wouldn't hit the same way because Bette she's not part of the public consciousness the way that she was still very much in the mid-90s. But that was a moment where the audience was just like, it was almost like a jump scare because, holy shit, we didn't know she was in this movie, and her scene, she's hilarious. But the story told in Get Shorty, for me, it's my favorite John Travolta performance. And I was angry at the time that he was not nominated for lead actor. He won the Golden Globe for Best Actor in a Comedy or Musical. It is such a great movie star performance. There are times where big stars give what I consider to be a masterclass in how to be a movie star. John Travolta, not in Pulp Fiction. I like what he does in Pulp Fiction, but I don't really see him as doing anything that unusual in that role. I feel like Samuel L. Jackson has the showier role. If anybody was going to be nominated for Best Actor, it could have been him, right? But Travolta in Get Shorty, he moves with the confidence of a generational talent and a generational star. And the character of Chili Palmer just has such a command, and he is almost like a performer. And so Travolta's performance works on more than one level. It works as that the character of Chili Palmer is somebody that you really don't want to fuck with. This is a mobster. This is a guy protected by the big hitters in the mob outfit where he is affiliated. And he moves with the confidence of somebody that can outfight 99.9% of people that are going to cross him. And so, yeah, he's putting on an act, but Travolta is engaging with the audience in a way that often I don't like, where the actor is almost winking at the audience and telling you, yeah, this is just a movie. And it's not that he's doing it overtly, but he is clearly giving a performance. It still works brilliantly. It doesn't feel artificial. This feels like a great actor giving a masterclass. This is how you do it. You want to see how to be a movie star? This is how you do it. And the supporting performers are all incredible in this film. Delroy Lindo playing a very different character, certainly than he was playing in the 90s. Another film released right around the same time, Spike Lee's Clockers. Don't love it. Spike's made a lot of movies that are better than Clockers. But Delroy in that film seems like a, pretty reasonable guy. He basically is like almost a drug kingpin kind of guy. And what he does in this movie, it almost feels like stunt casting, because you see Delroy and you have certain assumptions of what his character is going to be like. And yes, his character is a heel. This is not a very nice guy or likable guy. But Delroy Lindo is about the last actor of that era, that age and that era, when you think about this role. So how did they even consider, why was he even up for consideration? And he knocks it out of the park. And Gene Hackman would not have been somebody that you would have expected, oh yeah, we need like a schlock movie producer, let's get Gene Hackman. The guy who plays Martin Weir, the key character of the movie star that Travolta as a theoretical producer on this project, he's a mobster who ends up a movie producer. That's kind of the joke of the film. But DeVito could have been the guy playing the schlock producer, because Danny in real life, Jersey Films, they were one of the outfits that were responsible for Pulp Fiction even getting produced. Danny he wasn't in the movie, but he was one of the driving forces in getting that film made. But all of the casting, with the exception of Travolta and Rene Russo, every other piece of casting, well, you could say Dennis Farina also, playing a more comedic version of Jimmy Serrano from Midnight Run as Ray Barboni, or Ray Bones if you prefer. But even in a smaller role like David Paymer, who had been an Oscar nominee, and many people thought he should have or could have beaten out Gene. They were nominated in the same award for films released in 1992. Gene won for Unforgiven, and David Paymer was really good as Billy Crystal's brother. He outshines him. He steals the movie from Billy, and Billy, I love the guy. He's a huge personality, but in that film, David Paymer just feels so real. It's a great performance. So his casting was a bit of a surprise. He plays a guy who owes money to the mob, and that's how John Travolta ends up somehow getting into the movie business. And then the casting of James Gandolfini years before The Sopranos. If you ever wondered how James Gandolfini became James Gandolfini, how he became this kind of revered actor who died so young, watch movies like True Romance, like Angie with Gina Davis, and Get Shorty, and you'll see an actor who is so talented, he's able to make a role memorable just by sheer force of will. There is nothing on the page. The character of Bear, he is Delroy's character. He's his kind of bodyguard. And he's somebody who has worked in the movie business. And that's where John Travolta's character, although they should be antagonistic, Travolta really likes this guy. He says, wait a minute, I've seen you in movies. And that's how they kind of connect. And their relationship develops as more or less of a friendship when they should be antagonistic to each other. But you just watch James Gandolfini in this movie. You watch what he does with his eyes, how he's able to just act with his eyes and his body language. It's a different kind of masterclass in film acting. It's a different kind of this guy. Whatever it is, he's got it. And his career, because of The Sopranos, is remembered. He'll always be remembered for Tony Soprano. But, there's another version of The Matrix, as I like to say, where Ray Liotta, who was offered the role of Tony Soprano sight unseen, there's another version of The Matrix where Ray Liotta ended up playing Tony Soprano. The show would have worked, but it wouldn't have been as good because of Ray Liotta's prior identification as Henry Hill. It helps in some ways, but it probably would have taken something away from what they were trying to do and what David Chase and everybody in the cast, what they were all able to do with The Sopranos. But Gandolfini all but makes the movie, and I hate to say it, he steals almost every scene that he's in. That is how good he is and how strongly he registers. And I mentioned with the Pulp Fiction angle, not just because of Travolta's presence, but the way that Get Shorty is able to get laughs within scenes where pretty treacherous, terrible things like murder or like beatings are taking place. And that is a balance that is not easy to do. And nobody would ever accuse Barry Sonnenfeld of being Quentin Tarantino, but Barry Sonnenfeld's ability to balance the humorous with the serious while still keeping the plot machinery moving a million miles a minute. Because when you have these big sprawling novels and make them into movies, even if they're considered fantastic novels, it's so difficult to get that right. For example, Carl Hiaasen wrote a book called Striptease, and not that it was a similar kind of book to Get Shorty, but it was similar in the sense that it was a book written in a very cinematic way that had a ton of characters and a lot of plot threads going on at the same time. And Striptease, while considered to be an almost groundbreaking level of novel, the movie didn't work. It just didn't work. It wasn't that good. There were too many characters that didn't have enough to do. Get Shorty could be that. It could have been that. And unfortunately, the sequel from, I think, about 8 or 9 years later, Be Cool, that's what happened to the sequel. There were just too many characters and not enough for them to do. And Dwayne Johnson's a riot in that and all of it. It's not good. I would say don't even waste your time with Be Cool. It's not worth your time. Now, Get Shorty, as we speak, before I forget, it is freely available on streaming. I know that it's on HBO Max, and I think it's free on at least one other. It could be free with Prime. It is one of those movies that it's not really what you would call under the radar, but there are certain 90s classics which are not seen as much as perhaps they should be. And just because they're not as famous as other movies in the same ballpark. You know, for example, I read an article yesterday about Barry Levinson's Bugsy, a film which got, I think, 11 Oscar nominations and actually won 2 Academy Awards. It came out the year after Goodfellas. The joke is, if you want to use the word joke, not funny, haha, but the kind of wacky aspect is that Bugsy ended up getting more Oscar nominations than Goodfellas and more wins than Goodfellas. Goodfellas won, of course, for Joe Pesci, but it should have won Best Picture. It should have won Best Director. It should have won a lot more awards than it did. But Bugsy, although it was a box office hit, it wasn't as big a hit as Goodfellas. And although many people would argue it's every bit as good of a film, it's just not as widely seen all these years later. And it's not as well remembered. It doesn't have those kinds of, those incredible individual moments like Goodfellas, the Joe Pesci moments, how am I funny? And it show us a couple of fucking steps. Go fuck yourself, Tommy. What's this world coming to? Hey, that's what the fucking world's coming to. Get Shorty, to me, has those kinds of moments. But historically, it is a film that I feel like has been somewhat slept on. And I still consider it, even though you look at the Rotten Tomatoes, the score is a phenomenally high score. I feel like the movie is underrated and it's a bit slept on. It's even better than its reputation. And there are films which got great reviews, which a ton of people saw and continue to see and made a lot of money, which I still think are underrated by history. For example, The Truman Show. The Truman Show is a movie that I think is, top 10 best films of the best movie decade ever, the 90s. I still feel like it's underrated. And Get Shorty, while not Pulp Fiction, it is a worthy companion piece because of Travolta's involvement. And I think that it would be an interesting 1-2 punch to see what Travolta does as Vincent Vega in Pulp Fiction, contrasting with the full-on movie star magic that he puts forth as Chili Palmer in Get Shorty. I just love DeVito in this movie. Gene is incredible. Renee is great. Dennis Farina was like a cheat code. There's no movie where Dennis Farina wasn't phenomenal. I mean, he should have been nominated for supporting actor for Midnight Run. I mean, Jimmy Serrano is terrifying. Even if he has moments where you kind of laugh at some of the stuff he says, the Jimmy Serrano of Midnight Run is terrifying. Ray Barbone is probably just as bad, but his character has a little bit more of a comedic angle to him because he keeps trying to do away with Travolta, and Travolta just keeps getting the better of him. So there's kind of a humorous antagonism between those two characters. But Get Shorty, the rare movie or a rare movie which was buzzed about, which people were talking about and excited for months. It didn't come out of nowhere. People were waiting for it, and it ended up being as good or better than advertised. Released on this day, 1995. Get Shorty, directed by Barry Sonnenfeld and starring John Travolta, Gene Hackman, Danny DeVito, Rene Russo, Delroy Lindo, and a fire Dennis Farina. This has been episode 337 of the Confessions of a Not-So-Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your early Sunday evening with me here in New York. If you check out this episode on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you catch this episode on the audio platforms such as Podbean, Spotify, iTunes, or the others on which we're hosted, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. I'll be back with a new episode real soon. Till then, enjoy your Sunday evening, and I guess let's go Mets. Peace.